Welcome to Chapter 2, the throwing basics of my softball protocol. Today we'll review proper throwing mechanics by learning how to hold a ball and then move through a throwing progression that you can use in your next warm-up. Let's discuss how to properly hold a ball before you begin throwing. So here I have a 12-inch ball that's usually going to be for our 12U and up players. And the first thing that we want to find when we get a ball is the C of the seams. So when I say this, I'm referring to this C-like curve of the ball. This is what we're going to use to guide how we actually grip the ball. So in order to hold the ball, we always want to have our fingertips on the seams, specifically at the top of our C. So I'd grip the ball like so. So you can see my fingertips are on the top of the seams for the C. This is going to allow the ball to spin in a manner that we see all four seams. So as I turn the ball, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we're back to the fourth seam that I started on. Gripping the ball this way is going to give us the proper spin to be most accurate with our throw. Because when we throw with four seams like so, the ball is most likely to go in the straight line that we intend. The second important part of the grip for the softball is going to be how many fingers you actually hold the ball with. So when you're young and have smaller hands, it's okay to grip the ball with 4 fingers like so. However, as you get older and your hand is able to hold the ball with less fingers, it's really ideal to reduce that down to 3 fingers if you can by putting your pinky on the side like so. This is how I always held the ball once I got old enough to have hands large enough to control the ball this way. This is preferential to the 4 fingers on the ball because this gives us less room for error and creating errant spin on our throw. So when we throw, the last thing that happens is we snap the ball down. And so this is coming from our fingers, and we really don't want our pinky to contribute to possibly throwing the ball off course and causing some side spin on the ball like this. So if we can remove the pinky to the side altogether and only have our 3 fingers on the seams and controlling the spin of the ball, that gives us less room for errant spin and makes our ball more likely to go straight. The last thing that you need to know about holding a ball is where to actually hold it in your hands. So hopefully you've noticed by now, but there's some space in between the ball and my hand here. This is how we hold the ball to allow us to properly snap and release the ball with our fingertips last. The wrong way to hold the ball would be to have the palm on the ball. This is very hard to control. I don't have much wrist snap, and my fingers are not able to put any spin on the ball like so because the last thing to leave the ball is going to be the palm of my hand. Another reason why we don't palm the ball is because to actually throw it, we're more likely to have a player push the ball instead of throw. So to recap, to hold a ball properly, we want to look for the C of the seam, grab with 4 fingers, ideally 3 on the top of those seams, and have space between the ball and our palm. Go ahead and give that a try the next time you warm up to throw. It's time to start our throwing progression. The first thing you do in a throwing progression is with starting on your knees. So as you can see, my throwing side knee is down and my glove side knee is out in front of me at about a 45-degree angle to my partner. This is how we get set to throw in our throwing progression. The first part of this progression then begins with a wrist flick. To do the wrist flick, you start with your elbow at or above the height of your shoulder. We never ever want to throw with our elbow below our shoulder. This is what causes us to throw sidearm and puts a lot of extra strain on our shoulder that makes us prone to injury. So go ahead and get set for your wrist flick with your elbow at or above your shoulder height and pointed towards your target. Notice how my wrist is cocked back, like so. I then take my glove and put it just under my wrist to prevent anything else from moving except my wrist. To execute the wrist snap, all we do is snap straight down to our partner and pull down on the seams to create 12 to 6 spin. So the wrist snap, when done properly, looks like this. Notice how I finished with my fingertips straight down and made sure the last thing I did was pull down on the seams to create that 12 to 6 spin. Let's discuss what 12 to 6 spin really means. So to properly grip the ball, again, we find the C of the seams and put our fingertips on the top of the seam of that C. So now that I'm holding the ball like so, when I go to snap straight down, the last thing that happens is my fingertips roll off the ball like so. So you can see the spin that it's creating is like this. So 12 o'clock on the ball here goes down to 6, and 12 to 6 if we think of it like a clock. So we have 12, 1, 2, 3, 6 all the way at the bottom on a clock. So anytime we're throwing a ball, especially when doing the wrist flicks, we really want to look for that 12 to 6 spin. Go ahead and give that a try to start your throwing progression. Let's quickly review why 12 to 6 spin is so important. Let's first take a pitcher. Let's say our pitcher is trying to throw a curveball. In order to get that ball to actually curve through the air, they have to put lots of spin on the ball. So as a fielder who's trying to throw very accurately and precisely to my target, I don't want to have any kind of spin that's going to make the ball move or curve through the air. And that's the purpose of 12 to 6 spin. This is the kind of spin that's going to keep our ball going in a straight line. So really focus on that when you're warming up. You may see that your ball has something called side spin. So that looks like me throwing this way and having my ball start to spin this way. This ball is going to go in the direction that it's spinning, so it's going to curve to my left. We want 12 to 6 spin that's just going to keep going straight. So if you notice that your throws have side spin, give the wrist flick a try to really focus on developing your finger snap and making sure that your ball is going to go straight. This is super important as a fielder because it's our job to not only throw on target, but to make our throw as easy to catch as possible. If I have lots of spin on the ball that's causing my ball to move as it's going towards my target, it's going to be increasingly more difficult for that fielder to catch my throw. Let's review some common mistakes I see when players go to do the wrist flick. So a proper wrist flick looks like this. My elbow is at or above my shoulder, and my glove is under my wrist so that all that can move right now is my wrist. So the first common mistake I see is that players drop their elbow and want to do a wrist flick from here. This is very unrealistic because if I take my glove away, this doesn't look like a very good throwing position. So we don't want to practice something that we're not going to do. Being really good at fielding, and honestly softball in general, is all about consistency. So the more that we can keep consistent, the better off we'll be. One of the first ways we can do this with our throwing progression is by keeping our elbow up. The second common mistake that I see when players go to do the wrist flick is that their glove is under their elbow. This allows not only my wrist to move, but also my elbow to hinge. When I'm focusing on a wrist flick, I don't want to allow my elbow to move because players often will just throw with their elbow and forget to snap their wrist. In order to isolate the movement of the wrist, the glove needs to be up under the wrist to force players to only do a wrist snap. The third common mistake that I see players make when doing the wrist flick is that they don't get 12 to 6 spin on the ball, and that's because their hand is coming to the side around the ball. Really have your players focus on snapping down and releasing the ball such that the last finger that comes off the ball is the middle finger. Because ideally we'll be gripping the ball with 3 fingers, so our longest and last finger to come off the ball will be the middle finger. Let's discuss the next part of the throwing progression. We start about 10 to 15 feet from our throwing partner on the knee. My throwing side knee is going to be down on the ground, while my glove side knee is going to be up out in front at about a 45-degree angle to my throwing partner. Notice how the foot is also at a 45-degree angle and my knee is slightly extended. I'm not at a closed 90-degree angle here. This helps with our balance. Then we get set and ready to throw, like so. So let me break down this position. The first thing to note is my throwing side. Notice how my elbow is at or above the height of my shoulder. So we want to be somewhere in this window. I absolutely do not want to have my elbow below my shoulder because this is how we throw sidearm. Sidearm makes our throws more likely to be inaccurate, but also puts a lot more pressure and strain on our shoulder that can cause us to be more injury prone. So to fix this, bring the elbow at or above the shoulder. The second thing to notice when I'm in this position is how I'm holding the ball. My palm is facing away from my target. This is because when I come to throw, notice how naturally as I come, my wrist ends up behind the ball, ready to snap down on the throw. The other thing to notice in this position is going to be my glove side arm. As an infielder, I point my elbow to my target. If you're an outfielder, it's appropriate to point your glove to your target instead. Either is correct, but the elbow pointed is considered a little bit more efficient for our infielders. So once I get set in this position, I'm ready to make my throw. In order to make my throw, I want you to think of the movement here being initiated with our elbows. So on my throwing side, my elbow begins the throw and everything else follows, while on my glove side, my elbow begins to pull backwards like I would be punching a bag that's behind me. This is very important on the glove side because it creates torque and provides more power and velocity behind our throw. So to slowly go through the throw, my elbows begin the throw, and this creates a lever of my forearm that will help us get our velocity behind the throw. We don't want to lead the throw with our hand because this is a pushing motion, it's not a throw. So then as we throw, I get to a position where I'm ready to now snap the ball down and finish over my glove side knee. Notice how my glove side elbow finished backwards. This means that I used my offhand to generate torque and power on my throw. So let me give you an example of what this will look like at full speed. Notice how once I snapped down, I always finished over my glove side foot. This is very important to always finish our throw and maintain as much velocity and power behind the ball as we can get. Go ahead and give this a try as your next step in the throwing progression. While doing this drill as part of your throwing progression, there's a couple things to think about as you're throwing. As the person throwing the ball, it's my responsibility to make a very accurate throw to my partner and hit them in the chest, where it's easy for them to catch the ball. As the receiver in this drill, or the person catching the ball, I want to always catch the ball with my fingertips up and my throwing hand right next to the glove. This makes it easy for us to transfer and get ready for the throw. Try to avoid having your elbows out, kind of like a chicken wing here, because this is an inefficient way to catch and makes it difficult to transfer. The next part of our throwing progression is standing to throw. So we start maybe another 5 to 10 feet back from where we were on our knee to create a little bit more distance between ourselves and our partner. We then get in our throwing position. Our throwing position is going to be with our glove side shoulder pointed to our target, like so. We then get in our athletic stance by bending at the waist and softening our knees. Then we get in our proper throwing position that we learned on our knees. So everything in the upper half here is the same as the previous drill. The difference is now the throw is going to start with a stride from my glove side foot. Here I'm then able to throw and finish through with my back foot. A few things to notice when I do this. When I stride, the weight is going to transfer from the inside of my throwing side knee forward through my glove side foot and then my right foot, or my throwing side foot for my lefties, follows through. It's really important that your back foot follows through to make sure all the momentum you have behind your throw goes through the catch. Something else to note is that when I finished my throw, you also see that my throwing side arm finished to the opposite hip, and that my glove side elbow finished back like I was trying to punch a punching bag that's behind there. This gives us torque on the throw, as I discussed earlier, and more power. So what this looks like full speed is I get set to throw, I step and I throw. Give this a try as the next part of your throwing progression. Let's break down a slow motion throw here where I begin in an athletic stance. My throw initiates with a stride off my glove side foot. Take note of how my throwing side elbow is leading my throw. I snap through the ball and finish over my glove side hip. Also notice how I follow through with my back foot and that my glove side elbow finishes back behind me for maximum velocity. There are a couple important things to note when you stand up in the throwing progression. The first thing is that your responsibility as the person throwing the ball is to hit your partner in the chest with a good, accurate throw. As you warm up, you start moving farther back. Eventually, when your arm feels fully warmed up, you want to make sure you're throwing the ball hard to your partner. To do this, you want to think of throwing the ball through your partner's chest instead of just getting the ball to their chest. Ideally, what this would look like is our ball would go in a flat line to our partner, then we know it's going through them. We're throwing to our partner if our ball has a lot of arc on it and is just kind of coming down to their chest. We want to learn to throw the ball hard, so this is something to work up towards once you're warmed up. The other thing to focus on when you're in a throwing progression is when you're receiving the catch. To receive a catch properly, we catch with our fingertips up and our throwing side hand next to the glove. So if I'm in my athletic position like I'm receiving, I would step to the catch and receive with my fingertips up. So anytime you're in any kind of throwing progression and you're receiving the ball, step with your glove side foot to the catch and catch with your fingertips up. Do not catch with your elbows out in what we call a chicken wing, because this makes it very inefficient to transfer. Let's review common throwing mistakes. The first common mistake I see is that players drop the elbow below their throwing shoulder. This creates the effect of pushing the ball to throw or throwing sidearm. We don't want to do either of these throws because pushing the ball has no power or velocity behind the throw, and throwing sidearm will cause our throws to be more inaccurate while also putting a lot more pressure and strain on our shoulder that makes us more prone to injuries. To correct this, make sure your elbow is at the height of your shoulder or even above. The next common mistake I see players make when throwing is losing a lot of power and momentum behind the throw because they don't follow through with the back leg. Players also lose power on the throw by being lazy with their glove side arm. So let me take a couple steps back so you can see what this would look like. So a player would get ready to throw and their glove side just doesn't do anything. It's just here not doing anything, or they get set and they throw over their glove. We don't want to do this because we're losing a lot of opportunity for torque and power on our throw. Make sure that you're bringing your glove side arm through and back to get as much power from that side of your body as you can. Finally, a third common mistake that I see players make during a warm-up throwing progression is when they're receiving the ball. Sometimes I feel that players don't take this part as seriously as they could for some good practice, and they're just catching the ball and not doing anything with their feet or not being athletic when they're going for the catch. Alternatively, they may also be catching the ball with their elbow out in a chicken wing form. We always want to be very intentional no matter what it is we're practicing, even if it's just a warm-up. So anytime you're warming up to throw, you want to be in your athletic stance and catch the ball with your fingers up and your throwing hand side next to the glove so we can be quick to the transfer. So always be very intentional no matter what it is you're practicing on the field. Even if it's just a warm-up, there's always something that you can be working on. Thank you for watching Chapter 2 of my softball protocol. Let me know what questions I can answer for you, and stay tuned for Chapter 3, where I'll review my personal favorite drill, Rock and Fire.